Hello my dear YouTuber friends, and I do hope you're all keeping well. Welcome to this new video. This is a video that people have been asking for and a few of you may be curious about. The Hotas 1 versus the Velocity 1 Flightstick. Which is better? Which should you buy? Now the answer to that may not be as straightforward as one may think. In this video I'm going to look at both systems, go over both Hotas systems, give them a little flight test in Flight Simulator, and at the end I'll come back with my verdict. For the impatient of you, I've divided the timeline below into segments so you can go and jump ahead if you wish. For those of you with a little bit more patience, I do urge you to watch this video through. Particularly if you don't have either system and you're in the market for buying one of them. Okay, let's not dilly-dally. Let's get on with this video. So let's kick off with the Hotas 1. Now many of you probably remember when Flight Sim first released on the Xbox consoles, so the Series S and X, this was the way to go. Either by just buying the Hotas system by itself, which is what I did, but I'm just going to swing this round to the front here. You will notice on the front there it's got a connection for rudder, and you can switch it between PC and Xbox here. If you own a pair of T-Flight rudder pedals, which I also owned, I'm going to link that video I did that when Aces Down 1 donated me a pair of T-Flight rudder pedals. It's a very providential moment, in fact, with this forthcoming, but you can connect them, and that was the way to go, absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt, the best setup at the time, before the Velocity 1 flight yoke and the Honeycomb flight yoke release. This was the best setup to go. Now I've done a bit of research. The Hotas 1 released around 2017. The original Hotas, like the Hotas 4, in fact a bit of a blast from the past. I'm going to link my original video I did review of the Hotas 4 for PC back in 2017. So this is at least 5 years old now, so based on an older design. All plastic. The Flightstick itself does have a lovely feel. As you can see, it's got a twist action there, which you can use for rudder or other functions. I've always liked the design and look of the Hotas 1 compared to the other Hotas range, Thrustmaster Hotas ranges. Just always liked that sort of go faster white striped design there. Lots of different buttons. It's got a hat switch up here, which you can use for panning around your cockpit and external, etc. Couple of buttons here. Another button at the front here. And a trigger button. And if we come down here, you can see a few more buttons, which you can set for functions within Flight Sim. And the sort of Xbox branded buttons here. And also, goes without saying, you've got this lovely, meaty, big throttle here on the system. It's got quite a good range. And yeah, it really feels great in the hand. Another thing with the Hotas 1, as you probably all know, the cable itself. Now this reaches, it's about 6 foot long, so it's just under 2 meters. So if you sat back on your couch, particularly if you're playing the Xbox version of Flight Sim, sat back on your couch, you may need an extension cable for that to reach, and many people went with that option. But there's one other feature with the Hotas 1 that sets it apart from many other Hotas systems. With the magic of YouTube, I'll show you that now. And as if by magic, you can separate the throttle from the flight stick, and it does have quite a good range. And this is quite a small table, but it easily goes to the end of that table. It is linked by a cable, just be aware of that, but it does give quite a good range. So yeah, that's a nice feature. You can have it as all in one unit, have it on your lap and play Flight Sim, or you can separate it. Something else I didn't mention before, that's done via a little Allen key there, and there's a couple of screws that you loosen there. There is a tightening knob there, a tension knob there, for the actual flight stick itself. That's at full tension. Doesn't give much resistance, but many people like that. It gives enough for a good fly around in something like a fighter jet or Cessna, or even an airliner, so many aircraft in fact. It's not quite as tense, not quite as stiff as I like, but many people like that all the same. One other thing I didn't mention there, at the front of the throttle, of course many of you would know this, but you do have a rocker switch and a couple more buttons here as well. So you could use that as rudder, as many people prefer to do. And you can use these buttons, utilize these buttons as well. So quite a feature-packed little Hotas system. And of course, like I mentioned before, it was the way to go when Flight Sim originally released on the Xbox consoles. Anyway, enough of that chatter and overview. Let me give you an example of how this works in the sim. Okay, so here I am, London City Airport, Cessna 172. I've got my Hotas 1 connected to my PC at the moment. There you go, just hit record, you can see that hopefully there. As you can see, it's a fairly big unit, isn't it? Now, I've had this, typically I put a Hotas on my lap, and yeah, it's quite a hefty boy, this. So after playing for an hour or so, you come away with dead legs because of the weight of it. I'll come on to the Velocity 1 flight stick later in that respect. Probably see here I've got elastic bands. This is the elastic band trick. Now, I'm not going to factor this into the video itself because you're going to have different units and they'll come out differently. The throttle quadrant was a bit loose on mine, so that elastic band just sort of linking one elastic band this way, one that way. Hope you can see that, so one that way, and on the other side too. Just helps with the tension of that throttle a bit. But like I said, I won't factor that in too much with this video. Something I will mention, you can probably see that gash on my finger there. I gashed it yesterday, so it's not an illness, don't worry, I just gashed it, I'm just letting some air come to it. I'm sure somebody's noticed that already and has already left a comment. Anyway, so I've got the hat switch, the one hat switch on the Hotas 1. I've got it set up with quick views in mind. You can use that for panning around. In fact, if I go external, I can pan around. So quite useful to have that on a Hotas system. Many Hotas systems do have that. And I can move between my instruments when I'm down in the instrument views. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to throttle up. Lovely meaty throttle. Release the parking brake. I've got Y set as my parking brake. Do a bit of rudder action here. Lovely feel to that rudder. I've always enjoyed the rudder action on the Hotas 1, the twist action of the rudder. Some people prefer to use the rocker. I prefer the twist action on this. I think it's fantastic. And it works very well as a rudder, I've got to say. Let's just take off. Now you'll notice lack of a trim wheel on the Hotas 1. But I'm using B1 and B2. I showed you the button on the other side of the units previously. So I'm just going to use that to trim down a little bit, B1, and B2 to trim up. That works really well, actually. For buttons, I prefer a trim wheel, but the buttons work fairly well. With the tension of the flight stick, I'll mention that as well, at full tension, does actually feel quite nice. I've not used the Hotas 1 for a while. Loved using it when Flight Sim first came out on the Xbox. I've got to say, it does feel quite nice. It's got a quite nice feel. I wish this handrest was a little bit higher for me. Medium-sized hands, but it's a bit too low for me, and that can get a little bit uncomfortable after a while. And the girth of the actual stick itself, that can be little bit uncomfortable. If you got small hands, you're going to find this more awkward. But it's okay. It's definitely usable. I've used it quite a lot. Let me just throttle back. That's what I mean about the throttle there. I'll come to that later, but you don't use it a great deal, but it is a nice big throttle, as you can see. And yeah, I do have things like an autopilot button. I believe it's this button I've got set up for autopilot. If I had a course laid in, I've got a nav1 hold button as well. I don't... which button is that? It's that one there. Oh, was that heading? That's heading. So I can utilize the heading bug. Because of the only having one hat switch, I generally have to use my instruments to utilize heading mode. So I'm moving the blue bug via the heading knob here, which is not too much of an issue. You can definitely get away with it. On nav1 hold, let's take autopilot off and fly her manually. It's not bad, you know. Not bad at all. I've forgotten how good the Hotas one was. And like I said, when it was first released, it was the go-to flight controller for Xbox Microsoft Flight Sim. As you can see, it controls rather nice. Okay, that's enough of a demonstration of the Hotas one in the sim. Let's now go to the Velocity 1 Flightstick. Okay, so on to the Velocity 1 Flightstick. I'm going to keep this brief as I've recently reviewed this product, linked to that video in the top right, and that goes in more in depth. First thing to note, it's got a flight management display. It's turned off at the moment, but this will light up. It's got a little computer flight management display. You can alter things like the colours, flight profiles. In the future, Bluetooth will be forthcoming. Go and watch that video for an in-depth guide into that. It's got a lovely build quality, just to recap. Lovely tension on the stick. That puts some people off. For me, it feels like the real thing. In fact, I've increased those tensions in the sim via sensitivities to make it even more tense. If you get into a real aircraft with a stick like this, you'll find it's quite a tense stick. And that's fantastic. I personally love that. Got the twist rudder action there if you don't own a set of rudder pedals. And both systems, the Hotas one and the Velocity 1 Flightstick, goes to around 20-30% in the twist action. It's enough for rudder and it's enough for taxiing, that type of thing. Lots of different buttons to the side here, both sides. A couple of levers. Now this was also a bane of contention for some people, for some reason. It's a small throttle lever compared to the Hotas one, I guess that was it. But it's enough, absolutely enough. It's got a nice range, nice tension, nice texturing going on with the actual handle part there. If you're in an aircraft, typically you'll set it to take off. You'll adjust it a little bit in flight, and generally, until it comes to landing, you're going to leave it alone. When you come to landing, of course, you bring it down and then null your throttle. But it's enough, it does the job, and you're not going to be using it a great deal anyway. And if you are, I personally feel it's got a nice action to it and enough range. So I don't see an issue with that personally. You've got an extra lever, you can assign that to something like propeller or mixture like I do in the Cessna 172. And so much more. The two great additions to this stick, which sets it apart in my opinion. You've got the trim wheel. The Hotas one doesn't have that, but it's got a lovely trim wheel there which works fantastic in flight. And you've got an extra hat switch. You can use one to look around, pan around as normal. You can use the other one for autopilot shenanigans. I'll link the video I did about my settings and bindings for the Velocity 1 Flightstick, another recent video. There you can see I utilise the autopilot with that hat switch. I think it's absolutely fantastic. Another thing worthy of note. This is adjustable, of course. You can move it up and down. I've moved it right up. You can switch it to the other side. If you're left-handed, put that to the other side. Use your other hand. Let me just grab my other hand. So that's on this side now, imagine that. Use this as your throttle. Suddenly, you've got a left-handed Hotas system, which I think is fantastic. Okay, that's enough of a recap of that. Let me give you a demonstration of how this flies in the sim. Okay, so now with the Velocity 1 Flightstick, let me just start recording for this as well. Are you recording? I can't see. There we are now. So there you go, got it set up. This will be a familiar sight if you've seen my other recent videos on the Velocity 1 Flightstick. Let's go ready to fly. London City Airport again. So there we go. Throttle does have quite a nice range. Don't worry about that being smaller. Still works quite nice. Where's my release parking brake? It's A. So you're using the twist action for rudder again. Or, you know, when you get your hands on the stick, you can really feel the difference in build quality and comfort. So it's a lot smaller in form factor. With this on your lap, you don't walk away suddenly collapsing to the floor because your leg's gone dead. That's just a different build and form factor. Up in the air, using the trim wheel to trim up and down. Again, oh, let me just get that into... If you've not used a trim wheel before and you've used something like just the Hotas one where you're using buttons to trim, what a difference of immersion a trim wheel can make generally. That is in such an accessible place, that trim wheel. Especially when you got your hand resting like that, left or right-handed, whichever. Feels lovely. With the tension of the stick. Takes me back to my flight lesson. It's all I can say. You can just feel, oh, okay, that feels a little bit more, or quite a bit more premium than the Hotas one. Very comfortable, really, really comfortable to use. Of course, the hat switches, let's just throttle back a little bit there. Hat switches, I've got them set up where I can move between my instrument views. In that mode, as you can see with the heading bug there, it controls my heading bug. I'll switch on autopilot. You've probably seen this in my other videos, in fact, hopefully. And you can move around the cockpit freely, pan around with that button. Where's my external mode? You know what? I could sometimes forget where I've set my buttons up. Isn't that terrible? Oh, external mode. There we go. And pan around with that hat switch in external mode as well. Lovely. And of course you got all the autopilot shenanigans. Autopilot master on. Let's just autopilot master on. Let's go into heading mode. No, is that heading mode? That is... no. Which one did I set up for heading mode? You know, I can't remember my buttons now. Heading mode, that's it. It's the B6 button. And then I can utilise the other hat switch to control the autopilot heading mode bug. It's a world of difference, it really is. I don't have a course set up, so I can't switch on nav, but I'm sure you get the point. Listen, I won't go into too much more detail with this flight demonstration with the Velocity 1 flight. Let me now take you to my conclusion. Which Hotas system do I recommend you get? So, which is the Hotas system to get? Which do I most recommend? I said it wasn't going to be easy, and both Hotas systems have their advantages and disadvantages. So I'm going to give you a couple of different options and my reasons why. If you don't have either, and you want the best flight setup, particularly on Xbox, I'm going to make it more applicable for Xbox with this video, because on PC you have a lot more options in terms of flight peripherals, rudders, and that type of thing. You want full immersion, you want a Hotas system and a set of rudder pedals, but you don't want to spend a fortune. The Hotas one currently, I did a little research on Amazon, and I'm going to try and link my affiliate links down below in the description. I saw an offer on Amazon for $159.99, £160 in effect, for both the Hotas one and a set of T-Flight rudder pedals. That's difficult to beat. That's one heck of an option. Just under £160, so a Hotas system and a set of T-Flight rudder pedals. You're going to get massive immersion from that. If you want similar, and you're on Xbox for the Velocity 1 Flightstick, you're going to be paying with the Velocity 1, sorry, the Turtle Beach rudder pedals and the Velocity 1 Flightstick, around £360, £370. It's double the price, and it's all going to depend on your budget. You're going to get far more quality with that option, but like I said, it's over twice the cost. So that's got to be taken into consideration. For purely, what's the best Hotas system if you just want the actual flight stick itself, the Hotas system? Without a doubt, with all these features, with the trim wheel, flight management display, the range of options, the couple of HAP switches you have up here, and the potential in the future for this to run via Bluetooth, which is in the pipeworks, and hopefully that will be coming soon. And the premium feel of the stick itself and the sturdiness. This, without a doubt, is the better Hotas system. If we're taking Hotas systems purely in their own entity, this is absolutely the better one, as you would expect for a more recent product. But one thing I will say, and one thing I've not mentioned, it's like owning your own mini Velocity 1 flight yacht system. So if perhaps you don't have enough money to buy the Velocity 1 flight yacht system, you prefer Hotas systems. It is like a mini Velocity 1 flight yacht system in a Hotas form. I believe it's that good. I really rate it. But do let me know your own balanced thoughts down below in the description. Do give the video a like if you've enjoyed it, subscribe for more, and I'll see you soon.